course, Memorial Day yesterday means a selection show. And we found out Sunday night that LSU would not be hosting. You look at LSU's resume, 17-13 in the SEC is good, but 25th in the RPI is not. 10-16 against Q1 is not. And what's interesting is that LSU had 7 wins between 51 and 57 in the RPI. Bama was 51, so that takes away 2 wins. ULL was 53. That's another win. Missouri was 57. That's 3 more. And then Kentucky at 52, which I missed. 7 wins just outside Q1. You turn that around and, whatever, the breaks come your way, and then all of a sudden you're 17-16 in Q1. Yeah, that'd be good. But the resume simply wasn't good enough. I was nervous about it all week. I said that all week, that I was like, yeah, it looks pretty good, but it's hard to plant your flag in the ground and say this thing's over because the RPI is not great and your Q1 record's not that great. And that's kind of what I was going on the entire time. It turns out that LSU ends up as a 2 seed. So first, we'll talk about LSU's draw, then we'll get to what we thought of the committee. LSU draws the 2nd seed in Hattiesburg. They will play Kennesaw State on Friday at 6 o'clock, and Army will play the 1 seed Southern Miss. They're paired with the Coral Gables Regional. That's got Miami in it over there. Also has Arizona and Ole Miss, who squeaked into the field. This is a really good draw. Mm-hmm. It's a really, really good draw. And I think there's a lot of people that follow LSU baseball and or have a certain mindset, like a lot of us do. We're playing Southern Miss, like that little school up in Hattiesburg. Like, they're not any good. Like, we'll crush them. Okay, hold on. Southern Miss is good. They've got a good club. Are they as good as Tennessee? No. Are they as good as Stanford or Oregon State? No. Is it close to Baton Rouge? Their LSU will have a huge contingent? Yeah. Are they going to have a ton of top prospects at Southern Miss? No. So, yeah, in name brand, it's not much, but it is a good team. Mm-hmm. And then you look to the other side with the quote-unquote national seed, the top 8 seed as it is now. Miami's like a 50-50 to get out of that regional. Arizona's got a bunch of talent. Ole Miss can play you 1 week straight up. We've seen that here in Baton Rouge. We'll see. This is a really good draw, I think, for LSU. Doesn't mean anything. LSU got a great draw in the NCAA basketball tournament, and they were out in 2 hours. So, it doesn't. You got to go out there and win games. Yeah. But I saw this and went, this looks pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think this is the second best thing that could happen. Obviously, the worst thing happening, you're not hosting, but I think if you're not going to be able to host, I think getting a draw like this couldn't happen any better. Obviously, you look and maybe you put LSU in that same Miami thing with Arizona and Ole Miss, and you're feeling a lot different about your draw. But when you got Kennesaw State and Army, and obviously, like you said, Southern Miss a good team, but LSU has played a lot better opponents. Obviously, you go through an SEC schedule and you play some of the teams they play, some of the pitching they face, some of the lineups they face. Obviously, it's not going to be, just riddled with top prospects in this regional. So I think for LSU, you come to this regional, obviously, Tiger Nations are going to be in droves and full support. And obviously, I would love to have Doty and Barry back. It just makes you feel a lot better about going into this regional, especially if you can get some pitch in the back and really help this team out. So yes, I love this draw. I think if there was a draw to get, I think it couldn't be better than this one.
You'd be difficult to find a more attractive draw as a 2 seed than this one in terms of the next 2 weekends. And that's always kind of how I approach this entire thing. You never know. Sometimes Stony Brook, the 4 seed, comes out of the regional and they show up and kick your butt for a couple days. You never really know, but it is quality. A cursory overview of Southern Miss. I've gone a lot deeper than this in my research on them, but we'll get into that as the week progresses. Nuts and bolts, they were strong in Conference USA. They've got 3 starters that made all 10 They started all 10 weekends, same 3 guys, and they've been very, very solid, all 3 of them in the weekend rotation. They've got a strong 7 in the order, a couple of power bats. And so, look, it's a quality team with a veteran and deep starting pitching staff. They got a couple of lefties out of the pen that have given some teams some trouble as well. So, pretty good team. Kennesaw State, I took a good look at. They've got 2 guys who are kind of their 1-2 punch at the top of the rotation. They've got a 6'7" right-hander. They've got a stocky 6'3" left-hander that kind of looks like Jared Poche in terms of the way he pitches. If you think that LSU really struggles with left-handers, you may see the left-hander. You want to go with the guy who's got maybe a little bit better stuff, maybe the right-hander. Either way, they got a 1-2 punch. And then their okay offensively. They have played some SEC teams this year and have not had a ton of success. It's not a juggernaut of a 3 seed. There's nobody in this regional that has some top 25 draft pick as a pitcher that you've got to really be concerned with. It's very doable, and we'll get into scouting reports moving forward. That's not kind of what I wanted to get into today, but it's a pretty good draw for LSU. Now let's talk about the committee and where they slotted some things. Everyone was kind of surprised that Georgia Southern got a host site, that Florida got a host site, and Notre Dame did not. One of the things, as I evaluated the host sites, the top 8s, and the at-large bids, there was nothing that became a trump card in this evaluation. It wasn't strictly RPI. It wasn't Q1. It wasn't strength of schedule. It wasn't conference record. There was nothing that was the trump card that they fell back on. And while there are probably a lot of people that would look at that and go, well, then no one knows what they're doing. Like, what's the criteria? What are we supposed to do? Like, we don't know. And then there's another side of me that says, put some people in a room that are intelligent and tell them to figure it out with all the metrics they have. There shouldn't be one thing that you look at and it's just the end-all, be-all. Certainly not the RPI, the way that thing shakes out. My favorite metric is Q1 wins. They didn't factor that in very often, so if at all, in some of these. So on the one hand, I like the fact that they're using their brains and trying to have some real thoughts instead of just strictly going by some numbers. But I understand why some of these teams are frustrated. As you looked at some of the selections that were made, were there any that jumped out to you? I've got plenty, but I wanted to toss it to you first.
Yeah, to me, like you said, to me, maybe I'm in the same camp as you as value in quad one. And to me, like when you're a team like Georgia Southern, you're playing in the Sun Belt, so obviously it's not going to be the best brand of baseball you're going to be playing against weekend after weekend. And you go 6-11 in quad one. I don't love that. And now you're hosting a regional, and then obviously Florida. You only win 15 games in the SEC. You go 11-17 in quad one. Not that impressed with that either. And then obviously you got East Carolina as well in there too. So to me, it's like I said, going into this thing, it's so wacky. There's not that one thing, like you said, well, hey, their strength of schedule is amazing. They got this amount of wins. They're in. There is no they're in. They're kind of, you can look at all these resumes. They're slightly different in certain areas. And obviously there's some teams with some really amazing quad ones, and there's some teams with some really bad. So I still don't really know, even after they chose these teams, what's putting this team over the hump. I guess you would have to ask someone in the committee what those things are, but I just can't really find anything that's consistent with all these teams, especially some of the teams at the bottom of it, obviously 12 through 16. I really can't really point to what they're valuing and why they put some of these teams over some of the other ones.
So look, there are some that you can point to and say they really leaned on the RPI there. They leaned on the RPI heavily for East Carolina as a top 8 national seed. That's a team that was 2-7 in quad one. I yelled and screamed all week last week about that. I think it's a fraud for a team that has 2 quad one wins and 7 losses. Like if you were 3-0 or 4-1, like okay, and you had won a weekend against another host site or something like that, like I could get on board with it. But every time you step up in class, you get your butt kicked. That to me is a fraud, and I think it's ridiculous to award a team that has a 2-7 Q1 record with a top 8 national seed. I understand they've won 18 games in a row. Whatever. I don't care about that. When you step up in class, you get your butt kicked. Now, East Carolina may go to Omaha and get to the championship series for all I know. It's a weird sport. Fresno State won the national championship. But we're working off a body of work here. I think it's ridiculous, but they leaned on the RPI there. They leaned on the RPI for Florida as well as a host site. That's a 12 RPI team that hosted. As you mentioned, they were 15-15 in league play in the SEC, didn't sniff their division or their conference. They weren't even very good in quad one. They were 11-17, and they get a host largely because they looked at the RPI. By the same stretch, Notre Dame was 13th in the RPI right next to Florida. They were great in quad one, 14-7 in Q1. They get left out, and they get left out at the expense of Georgia Southern, who against quad one was 6-11, but the RPI was good. So in Florida and Georgia Southern, East Carolina's case, good RPI. Here you go. In Florida's case, in Notre Dame's case, hit the road. It was very, very odd to me. I think Q1 continues to be totally left out of the equation. I think Oklahoma absolutely, in my opinion, should have been a host site. They were 18-12 in quad one. Count the teams ahead of Oklahoma with quad one wins. North Carolina and Kentucky had 20. That's it. That's the only two teams that had more quad one wins. And you look and say, oh, well, there's Oklahoma. Who cares? They're out. Their RPI is 19. I didn't love that at all. I thought they got screwed. NC State and Ole Miss you look at. And NC State, based on what we've looked at, which is quad one wins and RPI, had a better case than Ole Miss did. NC State's RPI is 32. Ole Miss's is back at 39. NC State in quad one, 13 and 15. Ole Miss, 8 and 10. But Ole Miss gets in and North Carolina State didn't, because they thought that Ole Miss, having beaten Auburn and LSU on the road, was more impressive than anything North Carolina State did, where really the only thing that they could hang their hat on was a sweep of Georgia Tech. So it's a moving target. Yeah. Some got the benefit of the doubt for the RPI. Some got the benefit of the doubt for Q1. Some got the benefit of the doubt for winning a conference tournament, or how you played in the conference tournament when it comes to Florida. Personally, I think rewarding Florida for 4 days when teams are jumbling up their pitching and LSU's resting guys. LSU didn't play Florida, but I mean, you get the point. Like, you ought to weigh the 10 weeks of conference play more than you do the 5 days in the conference tournament, and that just simply was not the case here.
No, not at all. And I think, that's kind of what we talked about, last week, with just how, some of this team, we're looking at it, we're following Warren Nolan and looking at the live RPI updates, and it gets crazy, man. You lose to a team, you fly down, you beat a team, you fly up, but even with all that being said, they're still putting teams, there's not like 1 through 16 is getting in. They're taking teams from outside of the 16 and put them in. So what are they technically valuing? You look at a team like Notre Dame, their non-conference strength of schedule. Are they getting punished for that, even though they had an amazing quad one? It's just like, I think you would have to sit down in that room and really be in there to kind of see what are they doing to put some of these teams on top. Because really, when you look at the 1 through 16 that actually got to host, there is not one consistency. Some may be RPI, some may be this, some may be that. It's just no consistency. So that's kind of the biggest thing I really just don't really like about this whole thing.
I mean, conference finish, you look at the Big 12, TCU won the league. Well, they looked at their RPI and said, you can't host because your RPI is 36. Second place in that league was Oklahoma. They were 15-9, 18-12 against quad one. You're out. Texas, you were 13-13 in Q1 and got third in your league, but your RPI is better. You're in. It's a moving target, man, and it's really difficult to comprehend. I think, look, I'm okay with Auburn hosting. Their RPI was in the top 15. They did win 16 league games. They were okay in quad one with 11-10. That, to me, was always going to be a stronger resume than LSU, especially considering that they came to Baton Rouge and won, even though LSU had more conference wins with one more game. And Auburn obviously was one and done in the SEC tournament. But, I was okay with Auburn hosting. I think the biggest gripe of this entire thing has got to be Notre Dame, because for me, to finish with as strong a record as they did in the ACC, with as strong a Q1 record and an RPI in the top 15, and to not host, I think was criminal. And I'm sorry, Georgia Southern and East Carolina would have had to take a hike. Now, the D1 baseball guys said they were fine with most of it. I hear all this talk on ESPN watching the selection show. Man, how cool is it that Georgia Southern's hosting? Screw cool. I don't care about cool. Yeah. Make it fair. Yeah. And I'm not suggesting that they only did it to throw them a bone. They think it is fair. I just think they're wrong. But I don't want to hear, oh, that's so cool, they get to do it. I got no time for cool. I got all the cool I wanted when LSU got left out for St. John's, when I believe that was an effort to grow the game. And I haven't forgotten it in 12 years. So it drives me nuts. But it was your first time watching the merry-go-round spin, as now we're about to get to Ryan Schimpf here in a couple of minutes as the dust has settled now. And now they get settled on the field, so it is what it is. But your thoughts, your first time really watching this thing, up close and personal for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, just wackiness, man, craziness. And I think I'm kind of trying to see something here. I'm trying to get a little correlation here with the whole East Carolina, Georgia Southern thing, and even Florida. They do have a really, really great non-conference strength of schedule, but they don't have the quad one win. So I think going forward, our team's going to start, scheduling some tougher teams in the midweek. I mean, you can get your butt kicked from what I'm looking at, and they value that, because that's really the only thing. When you look at Notre Dame's
That's where Ole
resume,
Miss got the nod over NC State, not
yeah,
strength
so
of schedule.
that's really what I'm starting to. That's the only really correlation I can see with some of these teams over the teams with obviously better resumes is their strength is non-conference strength of schedule is a lot better, but they don't have the win. So you just schedule tough teams, get your butts kicked, and you're good with the committee. Like that's what I'm looking at here.
Well, I've changed my thoughts moving forward on your performance in the Southeastern Conference. My opinion was you take care of your business in your 30 league games, your lot is cast, and that's just not the case because Arkansas dominated Florida in that respect. They had 18 league wins, and they weren't even a sniff of a host site. And Florida went 15-15 in the league, and just because they got hot and won 4 games in Hoover, they're the ones that are hosting the regional, even though they were a 500 team in league play. They've played better of late, and they're pretty good. But it's just it changes my thought because I thought 15 you're in the tournament, 18 you're a host, 20 you're a top 8 national seed. That's obviously not the case because Arkansas is hitting the road to Stillwater here pretty shortly, and they had 18 league wins. So
Thanks so much for watching Hunt Hill on YouTube.
now do us a favor, hit the red subscribe button below and throw us a like. We'll see you next time.